Gatekeeping's one of those things. On paper, it sounds like it could kind of be a good thing, and then we put it into practice and everything goes to absolute crap. So in today's video, we take a look at gatekeeping, try to clearly define it, see what's happening in our hobby, and why gatekeeping can equally be a critical part of any safe environment for anybody to enjoy a hobby, but has more frequently become used in the context of making sure that certain individuals that you may or may not like don't enter the Pokemon trading card game hobby. But first, roll that intro. Hey Gengar Gang, what is going on? My name is Ryan, this is the Analytic Gengar, and welcome to another video. In today's video, we talk about gatekeeping the Pokemon TCG hobby and why it is a bad thing. Now, today's video is inspired by the article that you see on screen that was published pretty recently, July 14th, by Ludkins Media. So, the article is by Ethan Pohl. I'll leave a link, as always, to the article down below, assuming that I remember to do so. And, yeah, it's a pretty short article, but I figured in today's video, let's go over the article and along the way define and discuss some of the different topic points about gatekeeping. So, the first thing that needs to be addressed is what is gatekeeping. And gatekeeping can very quickly and simply be defined as someone or some group of people acting as a point of control to entry for a hobby. So, in the particular case of the Pokemon TCG, you gatekeep when you say certain people or certain groups of individuals or certain people who believe in certain things cannot enter our hobby for X, Y, and Z reasons. Now, in theory, gatekeeping isn't a bad thing. Think of it this way. Whenever you go to a baseball stadium or a football stadium, you're likely going to go through a point of security. At that point, you'll be scanned, you'll be, your ticket will be checked, etc., etc. That is a form of gatekeeping, and very practically, that is a form of gatekeeping under which the safety and security of all the individuals is, more or less reassured by the fact that you have to go through security to get in, i.e., they are literally keeping the gate safe and keeping the entire stadium safe. Now, to move it to a little bit more of a similar context, think of a Facebook group or a Reddit group that you may like. Gatekeeping occurs there because gatekeeping may influence who gets into or is let into a certain community. So, as an example, if there's a very specific Reddit dedicated to accounting students studying for a very particular exam, or medical students doing the same thing, they may gatekeep by asking you to submit proof of your academic pursuits. And they don't do this because, they, dislike certain groups of people, but they just want to make sure that if you're joining the group, you're going to have a positive impact, you're going to give as much as you take, and more importantly, that the topic of that particular hobby or that particular Reddit group is relevant to you as an individual. So that's gatekeeping. And honestly, in the situations that I've previously described, gatekeeping isn't bad. And that's one thing that I have to stress, is that gatekeeping, theoretically, at its highest and in its purest form, is not a bad thing. Put it this way, Pokemon TCG is a children's trading card game, and there are many children and many folks that are under 18 who enjoy the hobby as much as any one of us who's over 18. Only problem is, we want to make sure that that younger group is protected. And so, we may not let certain individuals into the hobby because, it's kind of sus if, they have ulterior motives or wish to do harm to anyone who's under the age of 18. And so that is a form of gatekeeping that I think is absolutely allowable and is honestly encouraged. I distinctly want people to gatekeep like that, and I've seen this play out on Facebook and other places where, people go out of their way to gatekeep in a positive capacity. So, again, to reiterate my point, gatekeeping is not inherently bad. It's only bad because of the most important thing that separates the current type of gatekeeping that we are seeing, and that is gatekeeping with a bias. But before we get into that, let's take a look at the article a little bit and see if we can't, get any additional context or insight from the article. So, the article goes on and starts by saying that the past year has been challenging for anyone involved in Pokemon. High demand, price increases, and with the prices of modern product continuing to go up, or at least remaining relatively high, there's this idea that there are some attitudes of resentment within the community. So this article specifically says that, modern products have gone down because of the increasing supply, which is true. Other products continue to remain high only because of some perceived shortages or because there haven't been as many reprints. And then the anger the community felt towards price increases has shifted onto specific individuals. So this is interesting. At first, it was towards so-called scalpers who profited off of the high demand, but it has now shifted towards investors and anyone who has been deemed to focus too much on the value of their cards, highlighting an issue with the gatekeeping mentality within the Pokemon TCG community. Now, this brings up an interesting point, and this is what I was mentioning earlier about biases. Because again, if you're gatekeeping in a capacity that is very much clearly dedicated towards objectively good things, i.e., keeping people safe, keeping the topic relevant, making sure that you're getting as much as you put into it, those are all reasons why gatekeeping should exist. But in situations like this, where people are simply, upset because of prices or X or Y or Z, that is a bias, and that bias is the reason that they gatekeep. So instead of doing something positive or upholding a moral truth, instead they're just gatekeeping because they feel a certain group doesn't belong because of X, Y, and Z reasons. This article points out that that particular thing that everyone is invested in is investors, right? Everyone loves calling them out because they're too focused on price and not enough on enjoying the hobby for what it is. But that is a demonstrated bias. Just because you can't invest that much money, or just because you're not willing to spend that much money on Pokemon cards, doesn't mean other people aren't allowed to. And that is an important and critical step that people need to take in order to realize this hobby is big and there's room for all of us. So, moving down a little bit, obviously there's a disclaimer that this is a media outlet, but that this is the opinion of a writer, i.e. this is an opinion piece very similar to this video, which I will also kind of ingrain my opinion here and there. The next part of the article, which is honestly almost the last part, says this gatekeeping mindset, anyone who focuses on possible future value or cares too much about their cards isn't a true collector, is damaging the hobby. It's not true. Not only is this mindset incorrect, but it's also exclusionary. The hobby can change. At times that change can be frustrating, and it's okay to dislike change. However, that frustration should be directed at the actual cause of change instead of scapegoats. Now, this is one of those things that I have basically been stressing over the past, give or take, 12 months. Whether it was towards scalpers, or whether it was towards prices, or whether it was towards shortages, I was very big on this idea of stressing the idea of looking at the root cause of the situation and not looking at the symptoms. Because if all you're ever going to do is address the symptoms, you'll never cure the actual problem. And this gatekeeping mentality that we've seen pretty widespread has actually been, something of a disease to the hobby itself. In many ways, we're looking and trying to identify scapegoats, meaning trying to identify people we can blame without really taking a look at what the actual causes are. And again, there's a variety of reasons why people might be gatekeeping. Let's just assume for a minute that everyone isn't perfect or good in this world. That people may be filled with hate, and that hate may be, directed towards a particular gender, race, creed, religion, or some other demographic that you may fill. Unfortunately, people may choose to gatekeep purely based on that. And if you need a good example of that, look at the amount of young women who have been met with pretty harsh criticism and honestly just awful reactions to their presence within the hobby. Now, one key differentiator that I do want to stress is that not every situation is going to be the worst case scenario. Meaning, just because someone is met with criticism or because they are being gatekept does not mean they are the victim of some sort of bias. As I'd mentioned at the beginning of this video, gatekeeping in and of itself is theoretically not a bad thing. It serves as a point of control. We want to make sure that the individuals who enter our hobby are productive, are valuable, are creative, are adding value, and not just here taking away from or detracting from our hobby. And so I've seen probably one of the best examples of this play out with OnlyFans content creators. It's really weird to say this, but it's not uncommon nowadays to see many different people opening up, a few packs of X, Y, and Z trading card game, posting a couple of their pictures, and then plugging their OnlyFans down below. Now, some people have taken the side of the opinion that they're completely able to do that, and that, more importantly, they shouldn't be met with any sort of criticism or apprehensivity because they are choosing to, also create on OnlyFans. But theoretically speaking, there's also a question to ask there, and that question is the capacity of gatekeeping, right? Putting aside any bias that one person may have, it's important to ask the question: what is this person doing in the hobby? What is this person's motivations for the hobby? Again, I hope the point that I'm making here is that there's two ways of going about this. Probably a wrong way and probably a right way. The wrong way includes mixing in your own personal biases or just looking at things from the wrong perspective, meaning you're saying, oh, well, this person's an OnlyFans creator and that's not cool. I don't want them in this hobby because of that. Because realistically, that doesn't make any sense. We all have hobbies and we all do things outside of the Pokemon TCG, and frankly, that has no bearings on the fact that we can enjoy the Pokemon trading card game hobby too. As I had previously said, there is tons of room and space for all of us here. But the perhaps better perspective to ask the question from, and again, this is more philosophical than it is practical, and it is very much not a question that needs to be answered, nor probably can it be answered, is what is this person's motivation to join the hobby? Let's think critically about that, because if all they're doing is joining this hobby as a means of accessing a new fan base to make money through paid content, well, that can be a very big conflict, and that could be something important for gatekeeping purposes. Do we want those types of people in the hobby? I don't necessarily know, but gatekeeping is one way to keep them out if all they're going to do is take from our community without ever producing content or creating something of value for our community. And that is the argument for gatekeeping, because not every person who enters our hobby is bad, but at the same time, there are some people who will have less than positive intentions for our hobby, and those are the people that need to be kept at the front door and honestly turned away. Now, that actually brings me to a really interesting point about this article in and of itself. Ludkins is not a stranger to high value sales. So interestingly enough, they write this opinion piece fully knowing that they stand to make a little bit of money from there. Now, I don't know if they plan on calling themselves out regarding that, but I certainly do. And so, Ludkins Media is one part of a larger Ludkins team, and I'm sure they stand to profit from expensive Pokemon card sales. So it's very easy when you're on that side of the equation to justify these incredibly high prices. At the same time, this is true. What they write here is 100% true. This mindset, they say, is incorrect and it's exclusionary, but at the same time, if you care too much about the value of cards, all you're truly wanting to do is see the price of the cards go up, not necessarily caring about the health of the hobby and the stability of those prices for more long-term investors, long-term collectors, or people looking to build a collection out. So that's something to consider from the alternative end of the perspective that we may be looking at here. Now, next up is Pokemon should be for everyone, regardless of how you enjoy the hobby. Well, I agree, Ludkins. Whether you're just trying to buy a few packs in store, playing a TCG, long-term investment, nobody should tell you that you cannot participate in Pokemon. I agree, unless it's the capacity under which I just covered. So if you intend on doing the hobby or people in the hobby harm, you should probably not participate in Pokemon. And again, in a situation like that, gatekeeping is allowed and should be encouraged. Nor should anyone tell you that you're ruining the hobby if you aren't participating in a approved way. Now, this is something that I also wanted to spend a little bit of time speaking on, what is the approved way? Who is approving what is right and wrong in the hobby? Well, that brings us back to the question of who should be gatekeeping. Like I said, theoretically speaking, gatekeeping is a perfect thing to do. It's a point of control. You have reliable people working that point of control, and they make sure that good people get in and bad people get turned away. There's never a risk that anything goes wrong, etc., etc. Obviously, in real life, that's not true. There are going to be people who get in, who wish ill will on the hobby, and it's, other hobbyists. There are going to be people who get turned away at the door because they don't meet certain criteria because the people gatekeeping are biased. So then the real question becomes, well, who is allowed to gatekeep? Is it the oldest person in the hobby? Is it the most expensive person in the hobby? Is it the most accomplished person in the hobby? How do you define any of those things? That really is why air quotes around the word approved is probably the best way to write that sentence. Because truthfully, that's why gatekeeping is so difficult to achieve in an ideal capacity in reality. Because theoretically it sounds perfect, but then you realize that a human's individual biases, experiences, and preferences all influence the way they gatekeep. And as a result, I don't think any one of us can be a perfect gatekeeper, because we'll all have likes and dislikes that influence who we say comes into the hobby and who doesn't. The only good news is that I think there are certain universal standards that we can hold ourselves to as a hobby. For example, do we want money launderers in our hobby? And you can, swap around money launderer for quite literally any other type of criminal in the world. But, do we want those people in our hobby? No. So I think there are certain capacities in which we can all objectively say, hey, this person is objectively bad. As long as everyone's being reasonable here, this person shouldn't be allowed to enter our hobby. And everything after that is probably then just a matter of yes or no, but is really existing on a spectrum where certain people may say yes, certain people may say no, some people may be split right down the middle. And that's why, this whole idea of who's going to gatekeep is so difficult to really kind of calibrate around, because honestly, no one probably is an ideal gatekeeper aside from those objective standards that I mentioned a little whiles ago. To wrap up the article, it says regardless of whether we agree personally with the way someone is participating, saying they're damaging it or not and saying they're damaging it or need to leave is a step too far. Again, unless it's a real situation where they're causing harm or ill will on others. Again, if there's some sort of predator lurking in the undercurrents of a TCG meetup, we need to get those types of people called out, reported to the authorities. So I know I might be doing the absolute most when I read into this, but not everyone should be allowed in a hobby. There are certain objective standards we can hold ourselves to that I think reasonably everyone will agree with. Take a so-called investor who's purchasing cards because they hope to see future returns. We can disagree with the way they choose to purchase those cards, but getting enraged because they don't love Pokemon enough when buying cards is ridiculous. Policing what is in people's heads while they participate in the hobby makes Pokemon fans come across as immature and pleasant. If there's one thing I won't disagree with in this article or add something to, it's this. Perfectly well stated. There's so many different spectrums through which you can enjoy this hobby, and so it's simply immature, unpleasant, and stupid of you to say, oh, my way is the right way and any other way is wrong, or your way is wrong because of X, Y, and Z reasons. Again, certain objective standards we should probably hold ourselves to, and we should also probably question certain motivations, but aside from that, if people are enjoying the hobby, let them do that. Finally but not least, the sort of last paragraph here says someone's place in the hobby isn't contingent on whether or not they're a true collector, just like it isn't contingent or not whether or not they're a collector, video game player, TCG fan, or anime buff. A varied amount of people participating in the hobby is healthy, and enjoying the hobby in different ways should be celebrated. The more people who participate in the hobby, the better, yes, and gatekeeping the hobby only to those who enjoy the Pokemon TCG in a narrow way is unacceptable and must stop. So this was a really strongly worded article. Ironic that their PSA grading service is literally right down there. As I'd mentioned, they stand to make a lot of money from high value sales, especially stuff that gets graded through them. So obviously there's a reason why this article could be published with such strong language. But at the end of the day, I do think this article hits many different nails right on the head. For the most part, unless you're a criminal or intend on bearing ill will, there's really no reason to chirp someone out or say they can't enjoy this hobby, because we can all enjoy the hobby. Here's one thing that I love about this hobby. My enjoyment can be separate from yours, and one does not have to directly impact the other. If I like looking at my binder, it's my binder. Nothing about my binder impacts your life, your hobby, or the way you experience it. And so I know it might not be the best way of thinking about it, but sometimes I think that old saying, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say it at all, is so true about this hobby. Because if you want to chirp someone out because they also like to, post on Instagram or have an OnlyFans account, then might as well just not say anything at all. As long as they're enjoying the hobby, let them enjoy the hobby. And then if there is an objective reason why we think we should be questioning their motivations or actively serving as a point of control for them, I'm sure that point will come out over time. And then the community at large needs to decide whether or not to accept or turn that person away. Case in point, if it turns out that one of these guys is a really bad person, or if it turns out that, X, Y, and Z OnlyFans creator is simply using the Pokemon TCG to gain more clout, well, maybe we should get him out of the hobby. But with all that said, friends, thanks again for checking out another video. I probably should go ahead and say that I obviously have some opinions that kind of trickle their way into this, but please bear in mind, the video is not directed at anyone, not chirping anyone out. I'm just using some of the more commonplace examples that you've probably also seen thrown about, and so I figured those would be the best way in order to help facilitate this conversation and make some good points for the video. Overall, I think it's important to gatekeep certain people for, very obvious reasons, and then everything else probably just needs to stop, because who cares if you're an investor, who cares if you're a binder collector, who cares if you like PSA graded cards, graded at ludkinsmedia.com/PSA grading cards. I don't know what the hell their thing is, but you could go find it if you want. Who cares? At the end of the day, as long as you're enjoying the hobby and I'm enjoying the hobby and the hobby is thriving, doing well, and we can connect and enjoy the hobby together, I think that's all that really matters. Other than that, friends, thanks again for checking out another video. As always, I appreciate your time and viewership, and if you liked today's video or learned anything new, feel free to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you're not already a member of the Gengar Gang in order to join in on the 3 videos a week and the dank litness that goes on in between. This week, we'll have another video on Thursday, and then I promise someone finally finished sorting all his bulk, so his table is now clear, so we're gonna break a box of Chilling Reign this Saturday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so stick around, stay tuned. Who knows? Maybe I'll give a pack of 9 packs of Chilling Reign away to one lucky viewer of that video. I'm just saying. Anyways, friends, thanks again for checking out another video. Hope you're having an amazing day, and we will talk soon. Peace.